Hello everybody, welcome to Dungeons & Drams. Today we're going to be talking about factions. Now factions are kind of groups of people within your world. Maybe you have a lot of interaction, maybe you don't have a lot of interaction, maybe they're the bad guys. Either way, defining them and having them really fleshed out is something that will really create immersion for your players and allow you to make easier decisions in the moment when you are improving. So we're going to create a faction called the Shadow of Brakath. Now the reason I created this one, it's a thieves guild with some assassins. I've had this one kind of somewhat created. I actually had this in the D&D game that is on this channel, but I decided to use this because a lot of pieces are already figured out, and that's something that you probably already have in your mind too. We can utilize ChatGPT along with what I have, and now we've got a fully fleshed out faction that I can actually ask questions of. Hey, how would the Shadow of Brakath handle this situation? Something like that. So let's go into ChatGPT and create this. So this is going to be a multi-part initial prompt. So as you can see here, I've already entered the first part. I'm a dungeon master playing Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I'm looking to create a faction. I'd like to provide you with a template, and then I would like you to prompt me for information. Anything I do not fill in, I would like you to generate. Do you understand? Okay, excellent. Now, what does that template look like? Well, this is kind of the part that's a bit longer, and I will read this out. I'll do it as quick as I can, but an important thing to note is that you can find all of this for free on my Patreon. I always do the prompts for all of these videos for free on the Patreon, and then there's some extra stuff that's, at the paid tier. So if you like the channel, it would be good to support it. I would really appreciate it. All right, so here's what we're going to do for our template. What is the main purpose of this faction? What type of people make up this faction? This is going to be anything from if it's a faction strictly for dwarves, or if it's a faction strictly for nobles, or even for, the paupers in a city, maybe like urchins, stuff like that. So you can kind of make of that what you will. What is the name of the faction? You don't have to come up with that. That's probably one of the harder parts. What is the faction's symbol or insignia? This is something that we're going to go over to Midjourney later on, and we're going to create an actual little insignia. It'll be cool. What colors make up the faction's symbol? What are 3 core principles of the faction? What is the structure of the leadership? How are leaders chosen? How many members are allowed to be in here, essentially? Like, how big is it? How long has this faction existed? Does this faction exist in secrecy or out in the open? What is the public's general impression of the faction? What is the faction's relationship with the local government? How large of an area does the faction play a role in? So, again, what's the size of it? What resources, if any, does the faction control? Do the members live in a centralized location or base? How do new members join? If there is an initiation process, what does it consist of? Does this faction have any rivals or enemies or other forces that oppose their general mission? And is the faction associated with any deities? Now, there are all kinds of extra things that you could add here. This right here, a chunk of it is from a template I found on Reddit like 4 years ago. I searched around. I could not find a link to it. Otherwise, I would link it here. And if I come across it, or if one of you happens to know it, go ahead and link it down below, and I will absolutely update the description. Either way, it was useful to me, so hopefully it can be useful to you. Let's go ahead and submit that, and now it's going to start prompting us for all of these different pieces. It's also going to probably give some advice. For example, you can see this. What is the main purpose of this faction? And it gives some suggestions. So I'm going to take my answers for the Shades of Brakath. We're going to talk about that real quick and just let you kind of know what I was thinking, and then we're going to kind of fill out the rest of this. All right, so I've filled in all of the information, all of the pertinent information, and I'm going to go over some of it, but there was one little thing I forgot, and this, again, will be on the Patreon, so it's not a big deal I forgot here. I added a piece for any notable history right here, and so the history, I think, is important, because if you have something in your head, like why did it come to be, you could answer that in a couple of these questions, and it could kind of figure it out, but if you want to just be blunt about, like, this is the history, then go ahead and do so, as well as anything else I missed. If you've thought of any attribute that I've completely missed, just add it yourself. And throw it in the comments down below, because I don't mind improving the prompt that I have over on the Patreon. I'll update it if you come up with something good. All right, so let me just kind of give you a quick little rundown of what the Shadow of Brakath is. Sorry, it's the Shadow of Brakath. I think I ended up changing it when I was playing the game, but either way. So the idea is that there's a Galabrazu, and he is kind of influencing this thieves guild. The idea is that he's giving boons to anybody who chooses to follow him in the way of magical rings. Now, these rings, as you elevate yourself within the ranks of the faction, will actually gain in power. So as soon as you're admitted, you're kind of just like a thief. And so it gives you +1 to stealth and +1 to sleight of hand. Now, this could be whatever you decided that you'd like it to be, but as you progress, and there's 5 levels here, you get a cooler and cooler ring. Now, the neat thing, and this is maybe stealing a little bit from Assassin's Creed, a little, but not really, is that you can't take the ring off. In a way that you can't put your finger back on, right? So the idea is you've now got this ring on and you can't take it off. And in fact, if you get close to a treasure that you are trying to steal, it actually will start to hurt your hand a little bit. And then whenever you've stolen something, you need to donate part of it as a tribute to Brakath. And that's kind of the whole idea. That was the general gist that I had in my head when I started filling this out. So I'm going to put timestamps, so if you don't want me to go through all of this, you could just skip ahead a little bit, but I'll make it as quick as I can. What is the main purpose of this faction? It's to collect wealth to give to Brakath. What type of people make up this faction? Any race is allowed, but typically people who are greedy and looking for power. What is the name of the faction? The Shadow of Brakath. What is the faction's symbol or insignia? So this one was less about the logo and more about how are they denoting themselves. Each member carries a ring of Brakath. Each ring is unique as to not associate each member with each other. Each ring grants +1 to stealth, +1 to sleight of hand. Wearer is unable to take off the ring, and the ring disintegrates if it's removed. What colors make up the faction's symbol? Black and red. What are 3 core principles of the faction? Honor among thieves, brotherhood, and commitment. What is the structure of the leadership? I'll actually go backwards here. So you come in and you're a Vesper. Entry-level member, proven 3 times, and we'll talk about that proving cycle in a little bit. The Shade are proven members. Shadows are imposing the will of the Whisper, so basically whatever the top person's telling, they'll just do. Then you have Eclipses, which are assassins. Now these assassins are meant to hunt down people in the guild who essentially break some of the tenets of the guild. And then you have the Whisper, which is the head of each chapter of the guild. So you would typically refer to each person as their title, so it might be like Whisper Noxia or something, I think was one of the names I have. But that would be like how you title them, like president or whatever. All right, how are leaders chosen? Brakath himself chooses the Whispers. How many members? It varies. How long has this faction existed? At least 100 years. I don't know, that was random. Does this faction exist in secrecy or out in the open? Many know of the guild's existence, but do not seek it out. I was kind of taking some keys from Skyrim here with the Thieves Guild. What is the public's general impression of the faction? Unfavorable. What is the faction's relationship with the local government? Occasionally works with local government, but publicly shunned. How large of an area does this faction play a role in? Now, I wanted them to have a chapter in every major city with the idea that there's thieves everywhere, right? And they should be at least led. So 1 in every major town or city. What resources, if any, does the faction control? They often get discounts on potions and have access to poisons, which many herbalists will create. Do the members live in a centralized location or base? No, but each town has a safe house. How do new members join? They need to be contacted, so basically somebody shows promise. If there is an initiation process, what does it consist of? They must prove themselves in 3 ways: stealing, subterfuge, and stealth. Now, when I introduced this in my game, I actually did kind of a one-off, and I'll link it up at the top here, just in case you want to watch it. It's from the campaign, so if you're just jumping in there, you might be a little confused, but I don't think you will. So we had a thief, a rogue in our group, and he basically had to perform a couple of different things, and he had to steal something, he had to subterfuge. In this case, he blackmailed somebody, and then there was a stealth mission as well. Does this faction have any rivals or enemies or other forces that oppose their general mission? And basically anybody who's a lawkeeper, so guards, governments, etc. Is the faction associated with any deities? In this case, Brakath, who's a Glabrazu. So he's not really a deity, but he is powerful enough to grant boons. And then the history here is what I put. So the Shadow of Brakath are spread across the entire world. Any village or city large enough to keep the anonymity of its members will have a thieves guild. Originally there were Vespers, Shades, and Shadows, but as the guild grew, the need for Whispers became necessary to ensure the will of Brakath was maintained. All Whispers are made aware of who Brakath truly is, and if they act in any way against Brakath or show resistance or hesitance to his knowledge, or to this knowledge, they are hunted by the Eclipse. The Eclipse are a group of members specially trained to be assassins. They will follow the will of a Whisper, but will also get orders from Brakath himself. All Eclipse are expected to act in the interest of the guild and will kill without question. I love this concept. I loved the assassins that are part of the guild, but totally acting entirely in the interest of the guild. And if you really wanted to, you could probably form something around that where you're being hunted and, you know, you've got these people coming for you. I think that's a cool little hook. And just like that, it gave an overview of the Shadow of Brakath. So this is cool. It even gave a little tagline: we take, we grow, we serve, in shadow we thrive. I think that's not bad, actually. I might change that a little bit, but that's not bad. Let's see. So there's an overview. It kind of talks about this. Faction symbol and colors. Each member carries a ring of Brakath. Cool, cool, cool. Black and red representing secrecy and blood. Core tenets of the Shadow: honor among thieves, brotherhood, commitment. Okay. Once you don the ring, you're bound to the Shadow. There is no escape. I like that. Faction structure and leadership. It talks about all that. Leadership selection. Operations and influence. This is like done. So this is very cool. Membership and initiation. Enemies and rivals. All right, and it continues. The truth about Brakath: while most members of the guild see Brakath as a distant patron of thieves and fortune, only the Whispers truly know his nature. He is a Glabrezu, a powerful demon of deception and greed. Through manipulation and supernatural influence, he keeps the guild in his thrall, feeding off the wealth they amass and the chaos they sow. Those who reach the rank of Whisper must pledge their soul to Brakath, binding them to his will. Those who falter, they are hunted by the eclipse, never to be seen again. So by the time that you have reached the upper ranks, you're basically given the choice to give your soul to a demon or die. Seems like high stakes, and I think that's very cool. There's one extra piece of information I forgot to include here, and that's that all guilds pay an amount to Brakath through a box controlled by the local Whisper. Weekly gifts must be made. So that's just me feeding it a little bit more information. Cool. So now it talks about the tribute to Brakath, and it's making all of this information here. Like, just off that one little sentence, it's spitting out paragraphs and paragraphs of information. Okay, so let's think of some cool things to do with this. So let's make up a couple of Whispers. Let's start off kind of easy. So I had created a red-skinned tiefling named Nexori, who was actually in the game. Now, I may as well put her in here, right? So the town that we were in was called Alowith Harbor. So I said, could you generate a whisper for a city called Alowith Harbor? It should be a red-skinned tiefling named Nexori. Generate a stat block for her as well as personality traits. Okay, cool. So the sea washes away many sins, but not mine. Interesting. Background and role. So it talks about all of the stuff. Nexori's personality. Cunning, merciless, seductive, pragmatic, and cautious. That actually, I would say that in the game I played her a little bit more kind, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter. Stat block for Nexori is a medium fiend, tiefling, lawful evil. I won't go through all of this, but her hit points that's about right. She is probably somewhere around a CR 9 if I had to guess. She is, yeah. She's got all of her abilities, traits, all of this other stuff. So, cool. There's some role-playing hooks and secrets. The city's underworld is hers. She's not just the Whisper of Alowith Harbor. She owns the city's crime syndicates, from smugglers to slavers, all pay tribute to her. And that's exactly the level of what a Whisper should be. It shouldn't just be, I'm the leader of the Thieves Guild. It should be, this is a real underworld leader. This person's got their hands in a whole bunch of stuff. You could very well make this like a real problem. You know, if your players are actually playing against the Shades of Brakath, rather than necessarily trying to join them, then they would be a problem. You know, they've got their hands in everything. This is really cool. All right, so Brakath's influence grows. She began whispering to Brakath about expanding the guild's control into the ruling government herself. All right, anyway, there's a whole bunch of stuff here. Again, I'll drop a bunch of stuff in the Patreon. So if you remember the membership and initiation, our person who wants to join, most likely a rogue, needs to prove themselves in 3 different trials. There's one to steal, one for subterfuge, and one for stealth. So what I've asked is, let's say that my group's rogue has been contacted by the Shadow of Brakath and is being asked to perform his initiation. Could you generate ideas for individual quests achievable in a short amount of time to satisfy each of the trials? In the case of my player, who was a rogue, he ended up getting contacted, and his 3 different trials were, one was subterfuge, and he had to plant a piece of incriminating evidence in an herbalist store in order to incriminate the owner, who was thinking about turning his back on the guild. So of course that can't happen. Then there was a stealth mission where he had to go into the general goods store at nighttime and do something I kind of forget. And then the third piece was to steal. The main reason I'm forgetting is because I'm remembering the stealing, which was to steal a necklace off of a pig named Snortimer, and that was just like a whole thing. So in this case, let's see what it came up with for some trials. Trial number 1 here is the test of theft, and it ended up giving 4 different quest ideas. Now, I don't have to do all 4 of them, maybe just one, but I could probably plan out 2 of them, and then I could give my player the choice. And, that's not a ton extra work for me, especially if I picked, like, the merchant's purse, which is you have to steal a pouch of gold off of a merchant's belt, just out in broad daylight, or you could do the widow's ring, which is to sneak into her house at nighttime and steal the ring off of her hand without waking her up, or take it in public. So you could kind of do both of those without really making a map, maybe a very simple house if you had to. And then there's the bonus completion down here, which is the rogue must leave behind a single red feather as a calling card, proving they took it without being noticed. That would be interesting. I don't really know if I would want to do that, because if you don't want to be noticed, why would you be leaving behind a feather? But that's up to you. Okay, so then trial 2 is the test of subterfuge. Then trial 2, we have the test of subterfuge. A blade kills 1, a whisper can kill thousands. That's a pretty cool line, actually. So you could frame a noble by planting evidence. It says the poisoned toast. So you convince a target to drink a harmless but tainted wine at a noble gathering. If successful, it will knock them unconscious, and their enemies will assume they were poisoned. The liar's game, a rogue must spread a false rumor so convincing that it reaches the city guard within an hour. Or you could seduce and betray. The rogue must charm or seduce a high-ranking official, gain their trust, and obtain a valuable secret from them, then leave before they realize the deception. So these are a little tougher. I'm not sure, but it would be interesting to see how they could utilize their party to help them to do some of this stuff. I mean, I'm thinking heist, right? Like a poisoned toast, you get one person to plant the thing, you get another to play a waiter, you have your rogue who's talking to them, distracting them. Like, you could make that really fun. And some of these would be only your rogue would be doing it, or I'm saying rogue generally, it could be anybody, but a rogue makes sense, right? So you could have it just be like a one-on-one session, or you could have it be your full party. And lastly is the test of stealth, which is true shadow walks unseen, unheard, and unquestioned. So you have the candle challenge, which I like this one. This is sneak into a high security chamber and extinguish a single candle placed on a noble's desk. If the candle is still burning by sunrise, they have failed. Stealth assassination with a catch. You sneak into somebody's house, you put a dagger up to their neck, but you have to bring somebody along to be a witness. Now, this would probably be another member of the guild, so you could actually play this in a way that allows you to use that NPC to kind of teach your rogue what you're expecting. So especially if you have a newer player, they're going to want to be sneaky because they picked a rogue, but you might, as the DM, want to give them some advice of how to do it a little better, and now you could use your NPC to help do that. So then you put the dagger up to the person's throat and do not kill them. Then you have the unseen visitor. The rogue must enter the city's main watchtower. I like this one too. Climb to the highest point and leave a red handprint on the commander's chair, all without being detected. And the last one is to steal something out of the pocket of another guild member. Now that one could be fun too. So all of these are great, and these, they're not quite as campaign specific as the ones I did were, but in this case, like, it would be no real challenge to like make it more campaign specific. Tell it a little bit about your campaign. My players are in this town. Here are the people who matter. This is maybe some ideas I have. Help. The final trial here, which I probably wouldn't bother using, says that if the rogue succeeds in all 3, the Whisper presents one final choice. They must kill a traitor to the guild, someone who once took the trials and failed them. If they refuse, they forfeit membership but are allowed to leave. If they hesitate, they become the target of the eclipse. So I don't really love this idea, only because I don't really want them hunted yet. So I think I probably skip this, but let's talk a little bit more about the rings, because the rings were something I really love. I love the idea of a magic item growing along with the player, becoming something that they are never going to get rid of. Like, they're going to keep their ring on. It should probably get cooler. So let's go ahead and tell it to figure out what it should be at each one of the levels. Real simple. I would like you to define the magic properties of the Ring of Brakath at each level of the guild. While this is generating, I was thinking of a new episode, a concept I've used in my own games of weapons that evolve as you do some certain thing. For example, one of the first ones I came up with this was called the Spider Fang Maul, and the idea was that every time you got a crit, it like lit up a jewel on the handle of this maul. And after you hit so many of them, the maul itself got extra properties. It was found in a spider cave, so after the first one, I think you got like spider climbing, or maybe you were able to walk along spider webs without getting stuck, or something like that. So either way, let me know if you'd like to see some of these like modified and growing weapons in a future episode. So one thing about the Ring of Brakath, if you were to use this faction, is that your player should be allowed to tell you what it looks like. Now, part of the charm, I guess, of saying that all of these rings look different, but they all are on every thief's hand, is that the player can customize it, right? So my player, this is what he made it look like, and it has, it's like a black ring, and it had little wisps of smoke coming off of it, and I thought that was cool and totally very fitting. So in this case, it talks a little bit about the ring, just so you can kind of have that as an overview. Now, the general properties of all ranks are that it gets +1 stealth and +1 sleight of hand. The ring cannot be removed by the wearer. If removed by force, it disintegrates, and the wearer can sense the general direction of the nearest guild safe house while in a major city. Now, keep in mind that some of these get pretty powerful, so you might want to tweak these to your own campaign. But as a Vesper, you're initiate level 1. You get Shadow Step, which is advantage on stealth checks while in dim light or darkness. Mark of Entry, the ring glows faintly when near another Shadow of Brakath member, allowing Vespers to identify each other. And Curse of Betrayal, if the wearer betrays the guild, the ring brands their hand with an unholy mark, alerting all members. Love it, love it, love it. The Shadow Step might be a little bit more powerful than what I wanted, but it's easy enough to remove that. Now, as a Shade, which is level 2, you have a couple of things here, and I actually really like these. So Shadow Step Enhanced, the wearer can reroll a failed stealth check once per long rest. This makes sense because actually for a while I was referring to Brakath as kind of like the Lord of Luck, or something with luck. And it makes sense to be like, oh no, they saw me, but let me reroll one time. All right, Fingers of the Thief, the wearer can use sleight of hand checks in place of dexterity checks when picking locks. That's potentially very useful. Night Whisper, once per day, the wearer may mentally send a short message up to 10 words to another ring bearer within 1 mile. So maybe you need some help, or maybe you got caught, but you already got the item and you want a way to get it out. Like, hey, I'm being hunted in this mansion. Come meet me at this window. I'm going to throw the thing out so that at least we can get the item that we're stealing. Something like that. That'd be pretty cool. Shadow Enforcer, which is level 3. So, Silent Footsteps, the wearer is immune to non-magical tracking and cannot leave footprints unless they choose to. Shadow Meld, once per day, the wearer can cast Pass Without a Trace on their self once per long rest. That's pretty powerful. Flicker Step, the wearer may teleport 10 feet as a bonus action once per short rest, but only into dim light or darkness. Now, I've definitely generated a lot of monsters that have a very similar ability, so that one doesn't feel too powerful, especially as you are getting up higher in the ranks of this guild. And something to think about as well is that there are other NPCs in this guild, and so for them all to have these powers actually makes a lot of sense if you want to stat them out, and it would make it a much more interesting fight if you have to fight them. All right, then you have Eclipses, which are assassins. I haven't read these yet. I'm excited to. So Gloomsight, dark vision extends to 120 feet and can see in magical darkness. That makes sense. Lurking Death, when attacking from stealth, the first melee attack automatically critically hits if the target is surprised. Okay, that's pretty cool. Silent Execution, once per day. The wearer can use invisibility on themselves for 1 minute. If they attack, they remain invisible until the end of their next turn instead of immediately becoming visible. That's super thematic. Voice of the Whisper, the wearer can mentally contact their whisper once per day from any distance. Okay, that makes sense. Then you have the Whisper, which again, this is going to be pretty cool. Whisper's shadow once per day. The wearer may become completely undetectable, cannot be seen, heard, smelled, or magically detected for 1 minute, similar to the Sequester spell, but temporary. So that helps them get out of a sticky situation. That's very cool. Brakath's Command. Once per day, the wearer may issue a command as the command spell to another guild member within 100 feet. That makes a lot of sense. Blood Debt. The wearer can mark a target within 30 feet. For the next 24 hours, the marked target suffers disadvantage on perception checks and takes an extra 2d6 necrotic damage the first time they are hit by the wearer. I'm trying to think about... Well, I guess it doesn't really matter. That one makes a little bit less sense to me, but it feels crunchy enough that there's some logic behind it. Then you have the Hand of Brakath. The wearer may cast Suggestion once per long rest, but only on a guild member of lower rank. Okay, that makes perfect sense too. You should have some sway over other people. We're over here in Midjourney where we're going to try to make a logo or a symbol for the Shadow of Brakath. So what we're going to do, I'm going to just kind of make this up as we go, so this might take a couple of attempts, but either way, I'll show you what ultimately comes up with a good one and what the prompt was. The first thing that we're going to do is /imagine, then we're going to do round logo. I'm going to put the colors, so black and red, and let's come up with something that is indicative of the Shadow of Brakath. So I said a shadow encompassing bloody daggers, hints of gold line the blades. So we'll have to see what that looks like. Now, if this doesn't work, what we'll do is we'll go back to ChatGPT and we'll just ask it to come up with a description of what the symbol would look like. This is what it came up with. It's not exactly what I'm looking for. It feels a little bit too violent, and that's probably my fault for saying bloody daggers. So I went back over to ChatGPT and I asked it for a description, and this is what it gave me. So it's kind of long. I'm not going to bother reading this whole thing, but pretty much it just says like it needs to be stylized. It should have horns for demonic. And then it went on to describe what all of these things look like. So let's see what it comes up with. Now this brings up an interesting question. So like the one on the top left is probably something that you could actually draw as a thief or even carve into something, but it's not really what I'm looking for. I feel like it's too demonic and we want it to be a little bit more subtle. So I'm going to again go back to ChatGPT and tell it to kind of change things up. So this time I changed it to essentially be crossed daggers, dark and elegant emblem of 2 crossed daggers with curved slender blades forming an X shape, etc., etc. Let's see what it comes up with. So not loving these, although the third one here is kind of more along the lines of what I'm thinking. What I do like is that it added a coin that was red. I think that's okay, but not really what we're going for. So I changed it again just to include round logo, red and black. Now, the reason I'm bothering to show you this process here is to show you that creating this stuff is not a one-time situation. You usually have to generate many of these. I might really like this top right one here. I think if I were going to use that would make a lot of sense. I think this is cool. If I were going to change anything, I would probably give some hints towards like the 5 different levels or even possibly just the word whisper. I think that would be okay, but I really think that this top right one is good. I'm going to upscale that and I'll include that in the Patreon post. Short of coming up with a whole bunch of adventure hooks or other NPCs or whatever, I think we've covered everything that we need to cover. Now, again, in the Patreon, you're going to be able to find this template, which you could use with or without AI. At the very least, it's very helpful to get your thoughts organized, which to me is most of what I'm using AI for nowadays, is I have the idea, I write down a bunch of stuff, but I want more. Things that I'm not thinking that I am thinking about. I don't know what I don't know, right? So if you come up with something cool, definitely tell me about it down in the comments because it's really fun to have new factions to play with. Okay, thank you everybody for joining me here on Dungeons and Drams. Again, let me know if you'd like any cool videos or if you have any ideas or things that you're struggling with. That's exactly what I want to make videos about. All right, have a great rest of your night. Cheers.